The more connected fans feel to their sports teams, the more likely they are to invest in it, whether it's tickets, gear, or souvenirs. Engage with fans by asking for their input on team decisions by getting a .vote team website. Visit GoDaddy.com today to get started.
It's all going on in sports right now. The NFL draft, the NBA playoffs, you got the Yankees and Mets and a whole lot more. What a perfect time to start a sports podcast. This is Gordon Damer on Sports. Off and running. Hey there, you. It has been a while, as the kids say. It has been a hot minute, but welcome in to the very first episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. I cannot tell you how pumped I am to get this project started and off the ground, and the fact that you're here listening to it. Thank you for jumping on from the start. This is like getting in on Google on the ground floor. We got so much to discuss in this first episode. Before we get into it all with everything that's going on, quick thing, a little bit of business. Do me a favor. Hit that like button. Leave a comment. Make sure to subscribe. You know, it really helps push the podcast out to more people and also kind of lets me know that you're enjoying it as well. All right, enough with that. Let's get into this week's headline. And the headline is that the New York Giants are definitely on the clock. The NFL draft comes up tonight. And wouldn't you know it, look at that. The New York Giants picking in the top 5 again. It's an annual tradition at this point. And my question is, what the heck are the New York Giants as an organization doing? And is it time to finally admit that Joe Schoen has done as bad a job as Dave Gettleman? Tonight is the NFL draft. The time for talk is finally over. It's finally here. And when you're a fan of a bad franchise, you love the NFL draft. It's the one time of year you can actually have hope. You can pretend, you can dream that the turnaround for your organization is right around the corner, that this is the start of it, especially if you have a premier pick, a top 10 pick, maybe a top 5 pick. Who knows? Sometimes even the number 1 overall pick. And that is basically the Giants every single year. They have a premier pick in the NFL draft, but despite all those picks, it doesn't seem like the production ever matches up. Last year, it was pick number 6. This year, they have the 3rd overall selection. But forgive me if I don't see the plan coming together, because I question whether or not there even is a plan. Before we get to tonight and what's not going to happen, let's rewind some. Let's get some perspective on how the Giants find themselves in the position that they're in. Let's go back to January of 2022. You remember, that's when the Giants unveiled their new brain trust, their new regime. They got a new fresh voice at GM. They bring in Joe Schoen from Buffalo, someone from outside the organization with a fresh set of eyes to look over things. They also found their quarterback whisperer in a new head coach in Brian Daboll. These two were not only going to turn around the organization and bring them back on top where the Giants belong, but most importantly, they were going to find the franchise quarterback for Big Blue. That was a major part of their appeal. They were going to find the next Giants franchise QB. And now here we are on the night of the NFL draft, going into year 4 of this new regime, and the Giants are going into the season, at least right now, with Russell Wilson as their starting quarterback. Could you imagine if I told you that first night back in 2022, hey, you know what? In 3 years, your quarterback going into year 4 with Schoen and Daboll, your starting quarterback week 1 is going to be a soon-to-be 37-year-old Russell Wilson. Are you kidding me? You might ask, well, who's the backup quarterback? Oh, don't worry. That's going to be Jameis Winston. And you know what the scary thing is? This is actually going to be an improvement over what the Giants have had. How scary is that? Will it be good? Oh, no, it's not going to be good. It's never going to be good with this tandem. But it will be better, which is really saying a lot for where we've come from. Now you might say, but Gordon, come on, they're going to draft a quarterback. Okay, I'm sure they will. It's desperation time. It's about time. But forgive me if I'm not all that confident in who they will be drafting, considering every single thing this regime has done at the quarterback position has been wrong from the moment they walked in the door. Let's run it down. They walked in, don't pick up the fifth-year option on Daniel Jones. Okay, hard to quibble with that one. We all thought that was the right call at the time. Then, of course, Jones goes out in the final year of his deal and has a career year playing for a new contract. Well, once he does that, you have to find a way to bring him back. You finally were able to tap into the greatness of Daniel Jones. So they do bring him back with that ridiculous contract that nobody thought was a good idea except the New York Giants. And what happens once they do that? He's hurt, he's horrible, and the organization has been a mess ever since. Out of all the bad things to happen to the Giants over the last decade or so, nothing has been more counterproductive than that first season making the playoffs and filling Giant fans with a bunch of false hope. But you know what's wild is somehow this organization, with this duo running the ship, is horrible year in and year out, but they're never in a spot to get the quarterback they want. Last year, couldn't trade up for Drake May like they wanted, winning meaningless games to take them out of position to get Jaden Daniels. Somehow the Giants are winning too much. Isn't that hysterical? And here's the thing. At the time, there were beat writers saying, you know what, those wins are important because the coach might have been fired otherwise. Well, if he was almost fired 2 years ago and only meaningless wins saved him, why has he not been fired yet, considering things have only gotten worse? It has been a complete mess. So that brings us to tonight and the NFL draft. And let me ruin some of the suspense. Let me ruin the surprise, if there is any surprise left. Are you ready? The Giants are not and never were going to draft Shedeur Sanders. Is there anyone anywhere who still thought that the Giants were going to select him with the 3rd overall pick? They can trade up, they can trade down. There is no scenario where the Giants would select Shedeur Sanders. And I want it on record for the people who have floated that as a possibility at any point of the draft season. Show yourself, because that was never going to happen. The New York Giants, as an organization run by John Mara, were never going to draft Deion Sanders' son. They were never going down that road. Even if he was the 3rd best player in the draft, the Giants completely telegraphed their entire thinking this draft season as long as you were paying attention. It's very clear at this point the Giants wanted to draft Cam Ward. That was the guy they wanted. That was their guy. And the moment that it was made clear he was going to be the first pick by the Tennessee Titans and that the Titans were going to draft him and were not interested in trading out of that pick, the Giants pivoted almost immediately to Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. That was their plan B or plan C or plan D. But there was no plan that they were ever going to draft Shedeur and deal with the hoopla that surrounded that move. That is just simply not the New York Giants. When the Giants drafted Daniel Jones, one of the attributes the Giants liked was that his demeanor was like Eli Manning. They want low or no drama at that position. And look, maybe the best attribute that Shedeur has going for him is that the Giants don't like him. We've already established that this regime has done zero right at the quarterback position. So the fact that they were never going to draft Shedeur is perhaps the best sign yet. He'll be good in the NFL. But there was zero chance of this tandem ever getting hooked up. Deion has already gone on record as saying the only NFL job that he would take would be one where he could coach his son. So what do you think would happen when the Giants next year start 0-2 or 1-3 like they do every single year? The Deion rumors would start. Reporters would be reaching out to him week in and week out. What do you think about Shedeur? What do you think about the Giants? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Heck, maybe he would get a weekly spot on WFAN to give his thoughts. Now, with the betting odds as public as they are, this is not the bold claim maybe it was a couple of weeks ago. But again, there is zero chance that the Giants were going to draft Shedeur Sanders. And it's not that it just became zero now. It was always zero. And I would recommend to you, as a fan of the NFL draft and fan of coverage of the NFL draft, any expert or draft guru or talking head who told you the Giants changed their mind or were thinking about it until the last minute is full of it. And the crazy thing, there's still a lot of that talk that's out there when it is abundantly clear now more so than ever before the Giants are not interested in Shedeur Sanders. And I get it. People love talking about the draft and people love talking about quarterbacks. But even with the third pick in the draft and Sanders sitting there, the Giants will be going clearly in another direction. And maybe the silver lining is that almost certainly we're going to be sitting in this same spot next year with the Giants, because if you're Schoen or if you're Dable, you can't expect ownership to be any more patient. You are lucky that you are getting this year. And if you care about job security, you need to finally show some proof. You need to finally rack up some wins. And I would question, how are you getting those wins with Russell Wilson as your starting quarterback? And I get it. The Giants will draft a quarterback at some point this year. And don't listen to Joe Schoen when he says only if the pick makes sense. No, the Giants are clearly in desperation mode. So they'll select Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe or someone else in the second round, or who knows, maybe they trade up to the end of the first round and get their guy. There's a lot of talk right now and a lot of buzz, and tough to know really what is true and what's not. But it's hard to trust this current regime with any decision, never mind a project of a quarterback. And the further into the draft you go before you take a quarterback, you'd have to expect that the guy is going to be more of a project. It's tough to trust the Giants' judgment given with what they've given you so far. And you really have to consider whether or not you're going to be starting over again next year with a new coach and force that regime to develop someone they didn't draft. It just feels like a complete mess, and it's been that way for quite some time for the New York Giants. You know, New York gets this reputation as this tough, brutal sports town where results are all that matters. But I wonder, how is there not more pressure on the Giants GM, Joe Schoen? You could make a solid case that Schoen has been worse than Dave Gettleman. The only success that Schoen has had came before he could really make his mark on the franchise. He walked in the door with 2 top 10 picks and certainly blew at least one of them in Evan Neal. Who knows? I guess the jury is still out on Kayvon Thibodeau. But ask yourself this, does this roster seem like it's in position to make some great jump next year? Like, how many wins do you think this team needs to get next year to keep the current people running the organization to still be in place when we get to this point next season? They've gone from 9 wins year 1 to 6 wins to 3 wins. What does the division look like? Well, the Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Washington is better. Dallas is still more talented. You lost every game in your division last year. The schedule doesn't come out until later this year, but whenever it does, it's not going to have many easy W's, that's for sure. In terms of opponents, you know you're going to play your division. You're going to have to play the Chiefs. The Lions are on the schedule. The Packers are always good. So if you're not winning 7, 8, 9 games next year, is this regime even going to survive to another season? Well, Gordon, you have to give them time. They're breaking in a rookie QB. Here is one of my 10 commandments when it comes to sports fandom. There is nothing more overrated in sports than this idea of patience, blind faith, patience that goes on forever. Patience is great, but at some point, there's got to be some proof. And so far, outside of a fluke year 1 where they made the playoffs and won a playoff game, where exactly is the proof that the Giants are on the right track? And in terms of patience, whose problem was patience recently? Were the Giants not patient enough with Dave Gettleman? I don't think so. What about Joe Judge? Did he just need more time to implement his system? I haven't heard a single person say that. What about Pat Shurmur? Did he not have enough time? Patience is not the problem. Results are. And you're going into year 4. And if you did not know any better, the results of this regime look a whole lot like the results of the last one. And whatever quarterback the Giants do wind up with, it feels like a desperation move. For lack of a better word, it feels like a Hail Mary for an organization that's entering the season with the hottest of hot seats for both their coach and GM. The coach will get plenty of focus starting week 1, I'm sure, but it feels like for whatever reason, the hot seat is not quite as hot for the GM, and it absolutely should be.
If the value matches up with what we have on a player and there's an opportunity to take any position, we'll do it. But I'm not going to force it if it's not the right value. And if the board lines up when we're on the clock and that's the position that we want to go with, we'll go with it. But not going to be backed into a corner on that. Like, it doesn't have to be, hey, this guy's got to be a starter. Like, it'd be nice to have if it's a young backup quarterback on a rookie contract too, because when you look at what we've paid for backup quarterbacks, whether it was Tyrod, Drew, to where we're now that's money you can spend elsewhere. So, to sign a guy with upside at that position that can develop and, maybe win you games, or maybe they develop into a number one.
There is the great Joe Schoen, who it is put up or shut up time for tonight. Man, you got to love the NFL draft, because maybe more so than any other part or event on the sports calendar, there are reports of stuff that you just already know. Like a perfect example, this team is looking into this prospect. Well, I think that the teams are looking into all the prospect. Isn't that kind of their job as a football team? There was a report the other day that the Browns and Giants are fielding calls for their draft. Yes, of course. Every team is probably fielding calls or making calls. Is there a team that's shutting off the phones, shutting down the phones? We're good. No, of course not. 3 predictions I can make about the NFL draft every single year. Number 1, any team that ends up with multiple picks in the first round, the next day will get an A+ grade. Multiple picks means that you ace the class. Never mind the fact that the reason you have multiple picks generally is you got one in the top 5. And how do you get top 5 picks? By having bad drafts and not being a well-run organization. So that's one thing. The second thing is, as a Miami Dolphins fan, I will tell you, they will draft someone in the first round that none of the draft experts think belongs in that spot. If they're picking 10, they take a guy who is projected to go in the 20s. And number 3, Jet fans, or at least a good portion of Jet fans, almost certainly will hate who they end up drafting. It is unbelievable. I could give Jet fans the top 5 picks in the draft, and there would still be a portion of that fan base that was unhappy. It's like the schedule. Every year the schedule comes out, and Jet fans want to convince you, we got a tough schedule this year. Well, the fact you don't get to play the Jets makes it somewhat tougher. I grant you that. But no, everybody's got a tough schedule. It's the NFL. That said, if there is one team that Shedeur Sanders makes sense for, I think it's the New York Jets. Hear me out on this. Maybe the Jets' new regime are the ones that somehow are going to be the ones that will unlock Justin Fields. After all, he was a first-round pick not that long ago, and they will be the ones to get him to balance the running and the throwing, not taking so many sacks. And maybe the Jets are the ones who are going to bring out the franchise quarterback out of Justin Fields. Color me highly skeptical that is going to happen. I think that is highly, highly, highly unlikely. Like a combination of the 1980s U.S. Olympic team getting struck by lightning twice. The Jets are not where former first-round quarterbacks go to be resurrected. It's where first-round quarterbacks go to be buried in the first place. I cannot get over how many Jet fans have bought into this idea that Justin Fields is going to finally blossom with this organization after what they've already seen. And this is not some Jets cheap shot. Well, maybe it's a little bit of a Jets cheap shot. But when you're one of these quarterbacks looking for a second chance after getting drafted very high and flopping in your first shot, and with Fields, this is shot number 3. What you're looking for that last chance to be a starting quarterback, you want a stable organization with a coach with a history of success. Maybe not in a major city, maybe with a little less of a media presence or a fan base that's rabid, that are expecting results right away. But that is where Justin Fields just came from. He came from Pittsburgh. If there was any situation that's stable and would provide you support where they have some history of success, the Steelers would seem to be that organization, and they were willing to walk away from Justin Fields almost immediately. If Justin Fields turns out to be the long-term solution for the Jets at quarterback, forget about comeback player of the year. He should be Time Magazine's man of the year. But let's say he does. Let's not. Let's dream for a little bit and let's go crazy, as Prince used to say. You do not know that on draft day. And the worst time to be looking for a quarterback is when you are desperate for a quarterback. By drafting Shedeur Sanders, the Jets would have both a short-term and a long-term solution at the position. When was the last time you could say that? Now, I get it. The current draft odds are that the Jets are going to go offensive line yet again, and that the Missouri tackle Membu is going to be the pick, or maybe Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State. That feels to me like you missed out on the tight end last year, so let's try and make up for it this year. Yes, a ton of fans wanted Brock Bowers. They didn't get him. He was sensational, so now maybe they get a do-over with Tyler Warren. I will say this, Tyler Warren might turn out to be a great tight end. I don't know, maybe, but I can say for sure he's not going to be another Brock Bowers. You missed that chance, it's gone. And sometimes the best move is the last thing your enemy wants you to do. And I can tell you as a lifelong Dolphins fan, and Jets hated admittedly, the last thing I want the Jets to do is find their long-term solution at quarterback. If you don't have a long-term solution at quarterback, you will always be a bad organization. Maybe Shedeur Sanders is not that long-term solution at quarterback. Certainly seems like a lot of teams have soured on him throughout the draft process. But I think that he's certainly got a far better chance of being that long-term solution than an offensive lineman, a tight end, a running back, or anything else. The bottom line, could the Jets use another weapon? Sure. But the lesson is always the same in the NFL. Joe Douglas, just think about it. A couple of years ago, 2022 draft, he got Garrett Wilson. He got Breece Hall. He got Sauce Gardner. But he was doomed, and his tenure as the Jets GM was doomed because they missed up on the quarterback the year before with Zach Wilson. If you don't have a quarterback, the rest doesn't matter all that much. And if you could add a quarterback and have some actual talent around him, whoever that guy is already kind of ahead of the game. Now, the Jets have not been mentioned at all when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. And maybe that's because they're not interested. Maybe it's just that deep. Maybe it's a smokescreen and they'll pull off a shocker. It's true there does not seem to be a huge market for Shedeur. The buzz now seems like he's more likely to be in the second round maybe than the top of the first. I've seen people say that he drops out of the first. At this point, it's tough to know what is the truth because there is no advantage to telling the truth if you're an NFL team, and there's a huge advantage to lying. But when you're an NFL club with a new coach and GM and the quarterback position is still unsettled, that's where I start with my things to do list for the offseason. The New York Jets would be foolish to look anywhere else than at quarterback. Solve that issue, and suddenly the other issues with your team are going to become much more manageable.
Marketing for a sports team? Can't quite think of a way to engage loyal fans as much as you would like? This is where a .vote web address comes in. Allow for fans to help decide player of the game, player of the week, or MVP of a season. There are hundreds of ways you can conduct polls for fan engagement that benefits both the organization and the fan base. Visit www.godaddy.com and purchase www.yourteam.vote.
All right, we've put it off long enough. Let's talk about your New York Knicks. Knicks and Pistons will have game 3 of their series later tonight. It's a critical game 3. Is there any other kind of game in the playoffs than a critical game? It's a critical game 3 after Detroit took game 2 of the series the other night, 100-94 at the Garden. And tonight is one of those nights on the sports calendar with the draft, with the Knicks playoff series, that you could wake up on Friday morning feeling great, or you could wake up on Friday morning hating life. So the question is, are you concerned about the Knicks? And my answer is both yes and no. How can you have both sides of the argument? That's what I do. It's my job to have both sides of the argument. No, my answer to, am I concerned about the Knicks winning this series? That's a no. The Knicks are going to win this series. Now, I can hear you shouting at your phone right now. Gordon, they've been outplayed. They've looked terrible. Tibs. They should be down 0-2. Tibs. They lost the home court. It's all Tibbs' fault. I hear you. I get it. I will say it again. The Knicks are not going to lose this series, or at least I'm not concerned about them losing this series, because if they lose this series, there's no way around it. It is catastrophic to this organization. That would be a catastrophic way for this season to end. After the way last year ended, after the moves made in the offseason, for them to get ousted in the first round of the playoffs, that would be the type of thing where heads would have to roll. And maybe that's what some of you Knicks fans want. It certainly sounds like it after days and weeks and months complaining about Tom Thibodeau. You don't need any more games to know who the scapegoat is going to be if the Knicks lose this series or whenever they get ousted from the playoffs. The blame is always going to fall at the feet of the head coach, because that's just the way. It's like that Chris Farley skit where he's the Bears fan and every answer is Ditka. With Knicks fans, the only person to ever blame is going to be Tom Thibodeau, no matter what. Didn't start this year. It has started since he came here. And no matter how much success he has in the regular season, in the playoffs, there's a certain portion, a good portion of Knicks fans who are always going to have a problem with the head coach. So no, I am not concerned that the Knicks are going to lose this series, but I am concerned because winning a first-round playoff series, that is not the goal for this group. The bar, the ceiling, the expectation, whatever you want to say, was set after last season, after getting ousted by the Pacers. The goal this year was Eastern Conference Finals at a minimum, at an absolute bare minimum, Eastern Conference Finals. It was about closing the gap with the defending NBA champion Boston Celtics. And we don't know how this season is going to end, but at least sitting here right now, it does not look like the Knicks have closed the gap in any way. And if anything, that gap has never been wider. Now, what I think you can see is that the trades made last offseason, the big moves of Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges, the offense down the stretch in game 2 looked exactly like the offense down the stretch of a lot of games last year. Get the ball to Jalen Brunson and basically get out of his way. He is going to hero ball his way to wins. And now look, last year, that made sense with the roster that you had, with the injuries that you had to get wins by hook or by crook. But for that still to be the case this year tells you all you need to know about those two moves. Those two moves were about improving the offensive potential on this team, and that has not happened. Now, you could say it's just 2 playoff games, but it's not just 2 playoff games. It has been all season. You give it a pass in the regular season because there's an adjustment period for sure, and nobody really cares about the NBA regular season. It's a major problem the NBA has. There's no such thing as critical, must-watch regular season games. So the fact that Knicks were 0-10 against the Cavs and the Thunder and the Celtics, you take that with a grain of salt. But here's the thing. The Knicks moves that they made up until this past offseason, they got more out of those moves than would seem on the surface, right? They got a better version of Jalen Brunson than even the most optimistic Knicks fan thought they were getting when they signed Jalen Brunson. Josh Hart, the same thing. Trade for Cam Reddish. Okay, Hart would turn out to be the heart and soul of the team. The Knicks then go out and make the big moves. They answer the big questions, and it seems like the idea that those moves were going to take them to the next level or to reach the next plateau, that has not happened. Nothing that has happened in this season, in this series, would tell you that they've narrowed the gap. Now, that is the macro. We'll get into the micro of this series, but that is the alarm that these two guys, Towns and Bridges, who you moved heaven and earth to bring in here, all these assets, and they have not helped you narrow the gap. That is the headline of this series heading into game 3 tonight. It feels like the Knicks built up all of this roster to be a good team. The Knicks are good. They won 50 games. They're the 3 seed. That's great. There's worse fates than being good, but they've built all of this to wind up kind of in the middle. They're not at the bottom. They're not terrible. That's fantastic, but they're not great either. And you thought that these moves were going to move the needle in the direction of great. And look, here's the thing, especially where you are coming from with the Knicks and where they're coming from, improvement is not always linear. I get that. It's not always a straight line where you take another step each and every season. Sometimes it's plateaus, sometimes it's back steps, and then improvement. I never considered this Knicks team a title contender this year. I never thought that they were going to compete for an NBA championship this season. But I wanted to see if they could narrow that gap with the Celtics, get into an Eastern Conference final, and see how it goes. But they have gone to a large degree all in on this group, and the returns so far, in the short term and in the long term, every piece of evidence you have to judge them on does not look good. All right, so let's get into who's to blame for game 2. Before we go down the blame road, first things first, I get it with online sports gambling being so ingrained in every aspect of sports right now that when things go a certain way, everyone everywhere thinks everything is rigged now. It's rigged. It's rigged. The NFL games every week. There are people, grown adults, who legitimately think that every game is scripted like WWE. And the NBA always has that kind of hanging over it with the Tim Donaghy thing. The ref a couple of years ago that the league started an investigation on, suddenly he retired after a 20-year career. Totally normal. The way the games are called, though, the free throw discrepancy that you saw game 2, and you see this from time to time, the lopsided way that game was called, it's kind of not hard to wonder if the refs are kind of putting their fingers on the scale. They even tried to even things up and make it close in the second half, and it was still, 34-19? And with the Knicks, they're almost like the Yankees in some way. If they're not getting the calls they think they deserve, it is all they focus on, and it gets them completely out of sorts. And it's not just the Knicks in the NBA, it's the entire league. It's a major problem. Luka the other night, SGA is another culprit. James Harden's the patron saint of foul hunting. But you saw it the other night, and the Knicks went all in on foul hunting, and it was really the only focus of their offense. At least that was a focus. There was no flow otherwise. All right, so let's get to who's to blame. The first person I would go with, and this is kind of in reverse order, so this would be like the third runner-up, it would have to be Jalen Brunson. Brunson almost looked like Julius Randle did back in that first year under Tibs, where he got the ball and the possession was going to be decided by him one way or another. Now, I'm being a bit sarcastic, but just a little. The weapons on this team have been greatly upgraded. Brunson has the ball in his hands, as he should, but it can't be hero ball like it was the other night because it was clear the Pistons were fine with Brunson doing what he was doing, and every possession was a grind. The Knicks can't live that way with that kind of offense night in and night out and win this playoff series. The Knicks could not get any flow whatsoever. And Brunson, as the point guard, has to take the blame for that. Now, Brunson's amazing. He's incredible. There's not a Knicks fan alive who does not love him for what he's been able to do in his time here. But there's no pass for this year. There's a lot riding on this season and this series. This is not Indiana or Portland or Minnesota or someplace we're going to cheer whatever the results are year in and year out. Now, is it that he doesn't trust the other weapons around him? I mean, the only other guys who took shots down the stretch were Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges, his college teammates. And Bridges was absolutely brutal. Karl Anthony Towns was invisible. Where was OG Anunoby? Tough to say. Brunson has got to be better as the distributor of the ball. So he's number 3. Then number 2, I would go with Karl Anthony Towns. Now, you might be saying, where's Karl Anthony Towns? He was tough to find in game 2, especially down the stretch. A complete non-factor. 10 points for the game. 10 points. No shots in the fourth quarter. And look, you can throw Bridges in there too, because the Knicks paid a fortune to get those two guys, and they fell flat on their face in game 2. One guy couldn't hit a shot. The other guy didn't take a shot. And don't give me that the Pistons defense and their game plan on Towns was to take him out of it. Yes, of course. But it's the Knicks' job to figure it out. It's Karl Anthony Towns' job to figure it out. It's Jalen Brunson's job to figure it out. Towns was great in game 1, so of course, JB Bickerstaff is going to adjust. Towns has to be more aggressive. He said after the game, he was just following the game plan and the team got some good looks. That is not good enough. You are not just a member of this team. You are the guy who is supposed to get this team to that next level. They're not going to do that with him not being a far more active part of the offense. And it wouldn't be hard to be more active. He literally did next to nothing in the second half in game 2. And sure, Detroit's going to try to take him away. Karl Anthony Towns came here with a reputation of being soft, and he is from here. So he should know what a no-show playoff series when you're expected to be the guy does to your reputation. He should know what that means. It takes you a long time to ever get up from that if you ever do. Now, it's only one game. He was great in game 1, so it's in there. He should find a way to bring that back for game number 3 later tonight. So that leads me to the number 1 culprit, and Knicks fans are going to be happy to hear this. Obviously, the main culprit for that game 2 loss has to be Tom Thibodeau. It feels like while the talent has clearly been upgraded on the offensive side of the ball, the game plan is still the same game plan. It has not been altered in any way to fit the talent the Knicks now have. The offense still feels like it has zero flow. It is completely disjointed. And you look at the offensive weapons that you have. You have one of the best bigs at shooting threes in the entire league. You have OG having his best offensive season. Bridges certainly has a bit of an offensive game as well. Maybe not his greatest strength, but it is something that you can rely on if you have a game plan that can kind of capitalize on it. And if this was just one game, that would be one thing. This has kind of been the story all season long, that it does not feel like the offensive potential of this group is being maximized. And look, you change the pieces, you have to adjust how you play. And okay, maybe that takes time. During the regular season, there's going to be some of a learning curve or growing pains or whatever you want to call it. But this should not still be happening. So you can blame Karl Anthony Towns for not being aggressive enough, but the lack of creativity in finding ways to get him to be a bigger part of the offense. And again, he took 3 shots in the second half. It would not be hard to get him to be a bigger part of the offense. And that is a direct indictment of the head coach. So I said earlier, Knicks fans are always going to blame Tom Thibodeau, but that doesn't mean that he's never to blame, because this is one situation where it is justified to blame the head coach. And for Tibs to say, well, they were doubling Towns. The 2025 Detroit Pistons did not invent a double team. It's been around for a while. You got to figure it out. This is not some secondary piece. This is a main piece of your offense. It would not be acceptable if it was the only thing the Pistons were taking away. And it wasn't the only thing. They took away basically everyone but Brunson and Bridges. And if anyone should know how to attack that kind of Pistons team, a tough, gritty team, short on overall talent, but long on heart and desire, you would think it would be Tom Thibodeau. That's his kind of team. So get back to the drawing board, figure it out, figure out a way to get Towns to be a more significant piece. He can't just do it all by himself. He has to be set up. And again, it should not be that hard. They gave up more for Bridges, but Towns was supposed to be that missing piece. He was going to take the Knicks to that next level. However you define that, you cannot simply chalk that up to, hey, they double teamed him. Every NBA superstar, which you evaluated Towns to be, gets game plan for. And the truly great ones are able to get their job done anyway. So Tom Thibodeau, get on it, because we need it for game 3 tonight. Okay, let's move on to 3 and out. 3 final things before we wrap up this first edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. We talked a lot about the Giants and the draft, but I never said what I would do at quarterback if I were the Giants. Giants almost certainly in the first round are going to take Abdul Carter, the pass rusher out of Penn State. Can't have enough pass rushers. Fills, I guess, a need because Kayvon Thibodeau's future is kind of uncertain. But what about quarterback? That's the major question. Now, I would preface this, and I think I said this earlier, I think it's probably best for this Giants regime not to draft a quarterback, because I think the coach and the GM have a pretty high percentage of not being here beyond this year. And if they're not going to be here, well, then I don't want the next regime to be stuck with what they drafted at quarterback. I want a fresh slate, but they're going to take a quarterback. The guy who intrigues me the most is Jalen Milroe. Couple of things. We talked about quarterbacks like they're finished products. and their success or failure is based on them and them alone. When it's based on 1,000 things, 1,000 factors, coaching and weapons and play calling and offensive line and pressure on the organization. The list goes on and on. Jalen Milroe is a project in terms of throwing the football. But when you take a look at where the NFL is at now, who were the 4 quarterbacks playing on conference championship weekend last year? It was Josh Allen, it was Patrick Mahomes, it was Jalen Hurts, and it was Jaden Daniels. All those guys can run. If you're taking a quarterback really anywhere, but especially early on, and you think that it's not just a complete project and not a complete lottery ticket, you think that this guy has a chance to be really good, you have to, in this day and age, have that ability of being a dual threat. Hurts and Allen came into the league, major questions about throwing the football. And if that's the issue, it seems like all these guys, when they get to the pro level, they're throwing so much more off season, in season, that their accuracy improves. Now, Milroe is a project, but if I had to pick a place to go with the Giants, it would be one where I want to see him as a potential superstar. And he is electric running the football. The throwing still has a ways to go. But again, he would be coming in and would not be expected to be the starter right away. That's why you have Russell Wilson. So that would be the way I would go if I was the New York Giants at quarterback. Number 2 of 3 and out, Nico Harrison needs to shut up. The Mavericks GM went out, held another press conference the other day, and said basically that the Maverick fans' love for Luka, he didn't realize how strong that love was. He said this out loud in front of microphones at a press conference. And, when that trade was made, I assumed, well, you know what? This guy's just taking the heat for ownership. Ownership wants to move the team to Vegas, so they trade Luka to kind of bottom out. And then he comes out and says all this stuff. It seems like almost every week he's coming out and explaining more and more and more. Here's the thing. There is no explanation. There are no apologies anymore. Nobody accepts apologies, no matter how heartfelt they are. And I don't think that Nico Harrison is actually trying to explain anything away. He just wants to kind of take the heat off him. But when there are no good answers, stop taking questions. And Nico Harrison has to absolutely shut up and deal with what he did. And finally, what would a sports podcast be without at least one mention of Aaron Rodgers? I think legally I am forced to discuss him at some point, so better last than not least, but we might get banned from all the platforms if we don't. It is amazing how quickly your opinion of a player can change, even when that player has a well-established resume. A couple of years ago when the Jets were going after Rodgers, it's tough to remember now, but that move did make sense. And yeah, it's the Jets and it was a fiasco and the injury. But back then you could squint your eyes and see how that could have been successful. Now, I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is ever going to play again. Seems like the Steelers talk has kind of stalled. What a shock. There's no NFL team that would thrive with him at this point as their starting quarterback. And I know he was upset with how the breakup with the Jets took place. The best thing that this new Jets regime has done was parting ways with Aaron Rodgers and not being sucked in to another year of the Aaron Rodgers experience. And I think that any NFL team, I don't know that one will, but any NFL team that goes down that road, you know what you're getting for sure. All right, holy moly, are you still there? That is a wrap on episode 1. Again, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you rolling with me here on Gordon Damer on Sports. This episode is just the start. I've got a lot more stuff coming up in the coming weeks. We're going to be doing 2 episodes a week, dropping on Mondays and Thursdays. We'll have interviews. We'll have surprise guests, a whole lot more. I said it at the beginning. I'll say it again here. Please subscribe, rate the show, leave a comment, tell your friends, wake up the kids, shout at your neighbors, whatever you can do to spread this show out there. You can find me on Twitter at Gordon Damer for updates, where to send your questions for the show as well. This is just the beginning. Thanks for being here. I will catch you next time on Gordon Damer on Sports.